Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers McSwine.
Welcome to this week's National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. And I am your co-host, Florence Myers McSwine, here with your host, Mr. Lee Martin, as well as our special guest for this week, Mr. Kane Rowland. Welcome to the show.
How are you doing today, Kane?
Hey, I'm doing well. Glad it worked out for me to come on. I've been wanting to do it for years.
Yes, and I'm glad that we're finally getting you on the show as well. And this particular segment of our show, we always talk about the National Federation of the Blind service, the National Federation of the Blind Newsline. So you are a subscriber to the service, and with your professional career as a certified financial planner and also a trademark practitioner, along with several other hats that you wear, the NFB Newsline plays a particular role in your services. Would you want to talk a little bit about how the NFB Newsline plays a role in your profession?
Well, I think that when anybody is blind, and I want to be careful about this because not everyone has the same experience. In fact, everybody has a different experience in life. But I would say it's very commonplace to feel disconnected. How do we get information? From visual media, mostly, from turning on the TV, from looking at stuff, from looking at other people, from getting pictures, from seeing signs. So I think it isn't for many people just about the loss of eyesight or even the loss of functionality for what they think they can do. It's not knowing really what's going on in the world, or realizing that in order to find out, you have to have other human beings read things to you. It can make for a really depressing loss of independence, I think, for many people. So NFB Newsline solves this problem, along with the problem of economic challenge. Who wants to pay $20 a month or even $10 a month for each of a lot of different services, newspapers, magazine subscriptions, or everything else that they would need to get digital access to everything they might want to see, including their local newspaper? Well, I think that Newsline does a wonderful job of solving the disconnection problem, along with solving the economic problems that people go through. This is wonderfully empowering, even for people that don't really feel like they're very tech savvy yet. The fact that you can get all that stuff free of charge, even just using your phone, I think gives you a sense of deep empowerment, no matter what you do for a living. So I really wanted to start there. For me, I am pretty technologically connected, and I do subscribe to some other things. A lot of it is made possible through the business that I'm in and the company I work for. More on that later, I'm sure. But Newsline gives me access to be able to look at what's going on in the world and in a lot of different parts of the world very quickly and efficiently. If I want Asia news, if I want COVID-19 updates, if I want the critical headlines from my local paper or even from the Indy Star. Not being from Indianapolis, I can still get that. And I don't have to have a subscription to all of it. And I don't have to have the challenge of being someone who's visually impaired and has to figure out how to navigate all those pop-ups and banner advertisements and paywalls where you have to log into every individual thing just to get stuff. If I need what I need in 3 to 5 minutes before I meet with somebody or talk with them, I can get that. And Newsline is the only source that's as comprehensive as that. It's something I look at literally every day, no matter what else I have to do.
And I must say that a lot of individuals do the same thing that you do as well. And, it is a service that is available to those that are print challenged, those that have certain forms of dyslexia, and those that have, as you see at the start of our show, the shaky hand syndrome. Florence, you want to talk a little bit about the magazines that we have briefly?
Surely, I love reading the magazines as most of us do. There's various magazines that I love to read. I always start off, I know, with AARP magazine, which is a fantastic magazine for seniors to get more information. There's also the Economist magazine, which is a great magazine to have. There's also magazines for children. We have a children's corner now, and so that's pretty popular. There's Guidepost magazines for people who would like to read inspirational stories. There's WebMD information magazine for people wanting medical information. There's Diabetic Forecast and Diabetes Living. There is a magazine for every person's taste. And we access that information using various tools. For instance, I prefer using my iPhone. There's people who still have a landline phone who enjoy accessing Newsline that way. There's also the A-Lady, as we refer to the Amazon piece of equipment. There's also a digital player from Talking Book and Braille Library, as well as our computer. So NFB Newsline is a great tool to have.
And I must say that there are several additions to the NFB Newsline now in our breaking news section, where there's 38 different publications from ABC, BBC, CNN, CBS, Huffington Post, Fox News, just a plethora of information there and publications. One of the newest publications or latest additions is called Root. And I would say go check out that particular publication and enjoy reading it. And there's also another publication that is called Rap. So I would say for those individuals that want to read more and get up more to the hip hop and more cultural information, check those two publications out as well. So we're going to take a short pause and we're going to come back with Mr. Kane Brolin and learn more about this wonderful individual. Stay tuned.
I'm Danny Wayne Beamer, Program Manager of the Elder Blind Program at the Will Center in Terre Haute, Indiana. I introduced the NFB Newsline to seniors in 13 southwestern counties in Indiana. I also utilize the NFB Newsline for my radio station public affairs shows. The NFB Newsline. Experience it today.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
I use NFB Newsline when reading Hammond Northwest Times.
Using NFB Newsline, I read the Christian Science magazine.
Dad, you read Jerusalem Post too.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Live the life you want. Read NFB Newsline.
It's free.
Welcome back to this segment of the National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. And Mr. Brolin, again, welcome to the show. And first question I would like to ask is, growing up, when did you first find out or realize that you were blind?
Well, I'm not really sure when I first really knew. I can tell you that my parents used to claim that they did not know I was blind until I was about 6 months old. My story, not uncommonplace back in the old days, the 50s and 60s, is that I suffered from something called ROP. And what that amounted to was too much oxygen given to me in an incubator after a very premature birth. So, had a lot of struggles. Very blessed to have made it out of there alive. And I don't think my parents even had a dream that there would be any other significant lifelong challenge as a result of that. Retinopathy of prematurity is what the condition actually stands for. Until my dad used to say that he realized that he would show me a visual cue, present something that maybe didn't make a sound, but I wouldn't reach for it when I was crawling. So never have a memory of eyesight, at least nothing functional that I could do with it. And so I guess how I would do is I would invert that question, Florence, and say, I don't think I've ever known of a time when I wasn't blind, but I really wasn't sure what all that meant. I think probably by kindergarten or certainly by first grade, I was beginning to get the sense that I was different and that there were people out there that interacted with the world in a way that was very different from the way I did. So, but I don't think I really had a great conception until I started to learn Braille separately from other kids in my class. I was in public schools. Until then, I don't think I really understood what blind was, and it took many years later for me to understand what it wasn't and to realize that the rest of the world kind of viewed me differently from how I viewed myself.
Growing up, Kane, were you an only child, or did you have siblings?
I had one sister, and I do use that in the past tense. Unfortunately, she has passed away some years ago. She was older than myself by about 6 years. So it was not, and I did not have additional sisters or brothers coming along before I did. So I did have a sister, but it oftentimes felt a little bit like an only childhood for reasons I could explain later. We ended up going to separate public schools, even though it was in the same system. I was going to school in a very different district, so I didn't have the same teachers, the same friends, and it was many years later. And she was not blind. I was from the very beginning. So in many ways, it did feel like a very separate situation growing up in my family compared to, say, other families that I saw interacted with.
So you're saying that you believe that your upbringing may have seemed a bit different than your classmates or your other friends in your area?
You know, it was highly different. And again, I don't think I understood how different it was when it was actually happening. I've had to process a lot of this stuff later in life, even during the most recent years when I have my own children, understanding how different my own childhood was. My parents did many, many good things that most don't even do today. They encouraged me to learn to read. They encouraged me to have really high standards, especially in school, because they understood life was tough. Both my mom and dad, who were both sighted, came from very impoverished environments. And so their main takeaway from childhood is it's hard and you've got to work very hard to get what you need. And they also understood that it matters how you look and how someone perceives you visually. And so whereas a lot of kids, and even I in early years, would act goofy like any other kid does, they were always impressing on me, especially from age 7, 8, 9 on, that what was most important is that I was socially acceptable, as they called it. I needed to be able to function and just even survive and compete in the adult world. And so really from the very beginning, and because I didn't have a lot of social outlets with other kids as a child until I got much older, I was very much in an adult world. And, I was very much encouraged to perform well at school. I did play music and that, but it was in some ways more liberating than what a lot of blind children get, because I was encouraged to do great things and to get great grades. but not in other senses. I didn't get a lot of the experiences of just play and fun and being frivolous and working those entry level jobs in high school at McDonald's or the pizza place my sister worked. I didn't get that. So, but until I experienced other people's, as they told me about them from college days or on up into adulthood, I don't think I quite understood how much what I was going through stood out.
Okay, so Kane, we got a lot to cover here with growing up, and we're going to take us a short pause, and we're going to come back and see what some of your ambitions were when you were growing up and how you come to terms, okay, with blindness. So stay tuned, everyone, and we'll be right back with our guest, Mr. Kane Rowland.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
Wow, I scored a touchdown when I found sports on NFB Newsline.
I enjoy reading TV guide listings on NFB Newsline.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind. We read NFB Newsline.
It's free.
I am a blind vendor, and one of the things that I truly miss is reading Vending Times magazine.
Hoosiers can hear Indiana magazines, circulars, national magazines, and information from across the globe. Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
It is a fantastic service.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today. We want to welcome you back to the National Federation of the Blind Newsline, Indiana. And today, our guest is Mr. Kane Rowland. Mr. Rowland, thank you very much for joining us today. And we want to continue on where we left off from the last segment. So, Florence, you got the next question?
Sure. Kane, we talked a little bit about your childhood, and as other children do, you have ambitions. When you were younger, what is it that you wanted to be, and what journey have you taken to get there?
Well, as for what I wanted to be, that's an easy and short answer. I wanted to be a radio announcer. My childhood was different and in some ways more limited, but what I did gain a very big understanding of from age, I'm going to say 6 or 7 on, is that there was a big world out there, and you could receive information from very far away. And I had a cousin who still lives and works in Iowa, where I grew up, who did exactly just that. He was on the radio. He was a DJ. Later went on to do many other things, especially in the advertising world. But I almost worshipped my cousin Mike because of what he was able to do. And I knew that whether I could see or not, if I could somehow get in front of the right microphone, I could communicate thoughts, music, creative stuff across the whole country. Back then, it wasn't so much possible to do it around the world. I guess you could back with the shortwave radio, but that's what I wanted to do. And I never wavered in that belief. And in fact, I went to college, studied radio, television, film at Iowa State University, and I even worked. Did a part-time job, about 3/4 time, for the 2 NPR affiliated stations in Ames, Iowa, that were on that campus. So I actually did earn a paycheck, sort of, a low one, minimum wage, working in the field that I had wanted to do since I was age 7. Of course, it's also said, we make plans, but God directs our steps. And my ultimate steps are in a very different direction because I realized by my late 20s that for a lot of different reasons, I was not getting promoted. I was not getting hired into other more gainful, higher paying jobs in other parts of the country that I had been applying for. So I needed to change course. And and do something else. And we can get to the other things later with your additional questions.
Could you describe your family now and where you live and work?
Well, my family is a completely different one from the one that I grew up in. Both of my parents, it's been a long time since I grew up. I graduated from high school in 1983. So since then, both of my parents have passed away in recent years. My sister also died eight years ago. I alluded to that before. I am married to a wonderful wife named Danica. She is not here with me today, but she and our kids are off at the beach. And we have 4 kids, and we have chosen to adopt our children through the foster system. So that is a whole different journey. I never growing up knew anybody that was adopted, never figured that I would adopt kids, certainly never figured that I would have anything to do with the foster system or with social services such as they are. But that's the end of our journey, at least to this point. My children, I have 4 of them, ranging in age between 4 years old and 12, 2 boys, 2 girls, and none of them is blind. So I've had the unique experience of being a blind guy with a sighted spouse, raising children that mostly have all of their senses. My youngest son has a hearing impairment. It's not total deafness, but yeah, it's definitely been a unique story.
Well, I just want to thank you for taking that role up as a foster parent. I was a foster child myself. Now, I also want to know, what are some of the challenges you face with the foster parenting, the parental rights in the state of Indiana?
The most significant challenge I faced was when I was wrongly accused of doing something that injured one of our children. In fact, the child wasn't even injured. And I still cannot say definitely who did this, but someone that had it in for myself and my wife, I think for different reasons, filed an anonymous complaint with the Department of Child Services, claiming that because I was blind and could not see, I had knocked one of my kids down a flight of steps and had injured that child. All complaints of that nature need to be followed up on. So I received a surprise visit from an investigator in DCS who came, spent probably an hour or 2 with me, examined all of our kids. I think we had just 2 at that time. It was several years ago. Saw that there was nothing to see here. No one was hurt. No one corroborated the story that whoever it was had filed. We never knew for sure who had done this, but it had to be investigated. I've got to give credit here to an attorney working for DCS in St. Joseph County, where I live. Her name is Sharon Albrecht. And in the first hearing that I ever stood before a judge for, this was as a witness to a hearing where 2 of the bio parents were attempting to get their children back. She said, I know this is not an adoption hearing, but it'll help you if we just address issues of your blindness head on. So I'm going to ask you some questions. I want you to write down as answers to a deposition just some things about how you manage in life and how you parent and what you do as a parent. Do you change diapers? Do you help your kid crawl or walk? Do you ever feed them? And so even though I was not the object of that hearing, those things did come up because we brought them up proactively, and I was able to answer all of those concerns in front of the judge that later served as the guy who signed off on the adoption for those 2 children, so that it never had to come up in discovery in a hostile way from anybody else. And I always have to thank Sharon for being forward-looking enough to bring that up. It's always been my belief that addressing issues of disability head-on, proactively, and with a positive attitude is the best way of overcoming objections. You overcome the objection before it's ever even voiced. And so that puts me on the offensive, not on the defensive, trying to foil somebody else's attack.
Well, Kane, I know one thing that all of this, serves as an example to many of our sighted peers and even to our blind peers that feel as though, how do we raise children as blind citizens? And we do that every day throughout this society, just like our sighted peers do. And we all have, challenges, but we overcome them as family. So we're going to take a short pause and come right back with our guest, Mr. Kane Brolin, and co-host Florence Myers McSwine for the conclusion of this show with Mr. Kane Brolin. Stay tuned.
The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back.
With my failing eyesight, I'm not able to read regular newspapers, and I'm not able to keep up with obituaries.
I've been a homemaker all of my life, but since my vision has failed, I wish I could read my favorite magazines.
Have you heard of the NFB Newsline?
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
As I travel the nation, I read NFB Newsline.
I live in Valparaiso, Indiana, and I listen to my local news on NFB Newsline.
As a student, I enjoy reading current events on NFB Newsline.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today.
And thank you, Kane, for that wonderful information. And I'm wanting to invite everyone to our next week's show, where Mr. Kane Brolin will also be our guest again. So we are looking forward to seeing you next week on the National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. Have a wonderful week.
The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476. The National Federation of the Blind encourages you to live the life you want.